They say I'm dreaming, told me to leave it. Different path I've chosen, I don't think they see it. Life in a trailer, no need for flavors. Cause I'll be laughing when I'm Justin Bieber's neighbor. Always time to second guess, weighs heavy on my chest. But the dreams I have, they stay alive. Cause you know it's ride or die. I've been dreaming, maybe I'm sleeping, losing my teeth, maybe I'm flying for no reason. I've been dreaming, what I believe in. I will get there soon, that's more than just a feeling. Yeah, I've been dreaming. Washing the bands, working the weekend, thinking about how I remember all these feelings. Right in this moment, I'm making no man. Writing all this down, won't stop until I own it. Always time to second guess, weighs heavy on my chest. But the dreams I have, they stay alive. Cause you know it's ride or die. I've been dreaming, maybe I'm sleeping, losing my teeth, maybe I'm flying for no reason. I've been dreaming, what I believe in. I will get there soon, that's more than just a feeling. Yeah, I've been dreaming. I've been dreaming, maybe I'm sleeping,
Happy Saturday and welcome into the SPL. Pitch and Aggro here. And we have, well, normally I say we have some good sets lined up for it today, but we just have the one. But don't worry, it should still be excellent. I think this is one that maybe you might have overlooked if you missed the game we had yesterday. But after Renegades upset Ghost 2-0, I don't think we can take any of these sets for granted.
And this is what it was like in Phase 1, remember? Even teams that were near the top of the standings had to be really scared going up against the bottom end of the SPL. It kind of trended away from that in the first half of Phase number 2, but I really hope that yesterday's Renegades win is a sign of things to come, where the bottom end rises up against the oppressive top 4 of the SPL.
I think that we might be seeing a whole lot more of that, and it's not going to get a whole lot easier here for Obey, but I think that they have been clicking here lately, Aggro. In particular, we've seen Sino on the Erlong Shen pick. He's looked excellent. We've seen Wolfie on the Raw pick. He's looked much improved. It feels like to me they found their identity, their play style. I don't know if it's always going to work against the top, but they look way more competitive now.
Absolutely. They found a composition in a play style that works for them. The big thing is, what are they going to do whenever teams start to ban it? Finally, hopefully that'll be today, just because you got to force this team to show you something else. They haven't really shown you anything else, and as long as teams are going to keep letting them play the same things, why would they? I don't think the onus is on Obey to show us anything else until a team really forces them to. I wonder if that'll be today. I imagine it will be with Space Station Gaming. I don't imagine that they're going to let Obey take the Erlong, Cupid, Ra top 3 like they have in basically every single game where they've been allowed to recently. I want to see the same sort of playstyle. I mean, look, Ra is not the only god that has long-range damage that's really easy to confirm off CC. I don't want to see Wolfie sort of switch it up to Hera if Ra gets banned. Pick Kukulkan. Khan. Pick something that just has long-range damage that is the exact same sort of idea, following up off of Erlong Shen or Naja or any of these sort of setup junglers that you can draft there for Sino. This playstyle doesn't have to be these exact 3 gods. You can do it in a multitude of different ways, and that's what I want to see from this team if and when we start to see those comfort picks get banned away.
They're going to need to show it to us because I, like you, don't think that they're just going to get to keep getting these same picks time and time again. And Space Station in particular, the type of team that I think will recognize where your weaknesses are, where your tendencies are, maybe even better to put it, and then try to punish those in particular. And I'm talking about Raffer here specifically when I talk about what this Space Station team could do here, Aggro. This guy's been playing really well. I know a lot of the other teams, a lot of the other players on this team get a lot of credit, but I think Raffer's been playing really well lately too.
I agree. I think he's really stepped up here in Phase number 2, but it's no surprise that when Raffer steps up, the whole team seems to get to that next level. Support is just so important in the meta right now that having a flexible support that can have the threat of picking something like Yamoja and carrying a game on it, and then being able to bottom 2 things like Kuzenbo or the Ganesh that Raffer's played recently that has looked really good, that's a really, really big advantage for your team. And look, Cherry, Dardes, Nika, those 3 have been so rock solid all year. Now that Vote and Raffer are starting to play at the level that we know they can, it's no surprise that this team looks really unstoppable because that's really just was the missing piece, was this duo lane. I think they've really hit their stride, and as a result, I think they're probably the best team in the SPL right now.
Hey, that sounds a lot stronger when you consider that Ghosts have had some struggles here lately. Now, I think Radiance maybe might have something to say about it, but I think you're 100% right. The top of the SPL may be starting to narrow a little bit. It might just be SSG, Radiance, maybe Sanguine up there with them as Ghosts going through a little bit of a slump right now. And I think that's what makes this set so important. If you really want to do want to become the new top dog, right, the new #1 team, then sets like these are the sets you absolutely have to win. If you want to be the best, you got to put some space between you and the 7th seeds of the worlds. So let's see how that starts off here in the picks and bans for game number 1. I already talked about what's on the line here for SSG, but I think Obey are sweating a little bit about these bans too, since we know they want some very specific picks.
And it's not like Erlong Shen has to be in the ban phase here if you're SSG, because Cherio has also shown a lot of comfort on that exact same pick. So you can just pick it top 2. I don't think Obey will #1 overall pick Erlong Shen, and SSG can grab that for themselves. Now that means they probably have to ban things like Cupid, where they might not have wanted to. If they want to let Obey first pick Cupid, you can't really pick Erlong Shen on the back end because that is just such a bad matchup for him. But I feel like otherwise, you can do a lot of things in this pick and ban phase to adjust your play style to what Obey you know they are going to want to pick.
At a certain point, I think I'm going to grow numb to Dardes commanding this much respect in the pick ban phase, but I don't know if I've reached it just yet, man. You have to spend so much attention, so much time making sure that this guy it's not just an instant L. Sometimes when Dardes gets off, it's just an instant L. So I think Obey are trying to slow that down right now. And again, at least SSG, the luxury of just banning anything that they feel like they'll take the Persephone, the Ola run out of the equation. And then Obey, looks like they're going to turn a little bit towards the Hunters here as well, banning away this Freya.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting ban phase already from both sides. Now SSG has a choice to make. Yamoja, I'd imagine they'll leave open because Inbound has not looked super comfortable on that pick and the opportunities that Obey gets to take it. Now Cthulhu's open, but again, that hasn't really been the recipe of Obey's success most of the time. Nem is open, same story. That's the problem whenever your play style is pretty one-dimensional in the sense that it's these off-meta picks. At least, again, we've seen from Obey. They might not be one-dimensional, but we can only go on off the information that we've seen from them in the SPL. That means there's going to be a lot of meta selections that if the enemy team just off-bans a little bit, at SSG really didn't. It was Obey that ended up off-banning here. That's going to leave open a whole lot of really strong picks. So now we could see SSG go Yamoja Rom. I was thinking Yamoja Nemesis is probably where I'd be going, but SSG has shown a propensity to leave Nem open a little bit longer than a lot of other teams. You could even wait on the Yamoja. If Obey's not going to top pick it, I really don't see a world where Obey takes the Yamoja. Inbound has just looked so much more comfortable on other things.
I think that made a lot of sense what you were saying, maybe waiting on the Yamoja, but it looks like SSG disagree. Rom Yamoja, still pretty good start to your game. Rom, the best hunter in the game for my money right now, and Yamoja, the best support in the game for my money right now. And they might still be able to come around to the Nemesis on the back swing. We don't know for sure if Sino is going to take that, especially when they've had such success on the Erlong Shen. They might go back to that pick instead, but I don't think it's much surprise that this Cupid is coming through for Wowie. It provides so much control. I feel like it hits its spike relatively quickly too, maybe not quite as late as some of those other hunters, and team fights really, really well.
I agree that Rom is the best hunter in the game right now, but when you're against Obey, I think there is some temptation to prioritize the Cupid a little bit more highly because you know that's what they prioritize. Wowie loves this Cupid selection, but it is still a pretty positive matchup for Rom. Rom kind of rose in popularity in response to Cupid, and then people kind of realized that, hey, this guy's just good outright. We can pick him against literally anything, and he'd be able to farm. But this is not an accident that Obey is able to pick the Cupid with Vote taking that Rom. Clearly, SSG has some sort of game plan that's going to be ready for this Cupid because there's no world in which they're ever surprised by that pick.
No, not SSG, a team that loves to do their homework. Hera comes in for Dardes, further proving what a fruitless effort it can be at times to try and ban this guy out. He's just going to find something else to beat you with, and this time it will be the Hera, something of a specialty pick for him. Now these bans a bit focused on the jungler, and that makes sense. We don't see any junglers picked in just yet. So the Robin and the Kali banned, but no Nemesis here just yet. It looks like they're going towards early game and late game junglers so far.
And no Erlong Shen ban either for SSG tells me that they might just take Erlong because they have the first pick coming out of this ban phase. Obey may have to ban it themselves if they're scared of Cherio taking it, which I think is a pretty fair fear for them to have at this point. I like Obey's comp if they take Nemesis themselves. They decide to ban it. I really don't think I would have seen Cherio picking them into Cupid Kuzenbo. I think Erlong is still not a great pick for SSG here because of that Cupid, but I think that Nem is potentially even worse. I would have liked to see Obey kind of leave both open, and then you kind of give SSG that temptation to leave Erlong open and pick the Nemesis, and therefore leaving the Erlong Shen for Sino. SSG really, this is, in my mind, just another ban towards Sino, picking the Erlong Shen in a matchup where it doesn't feel that great, but just trusting that Cheerio will be able to navigate it anyways.
I mean, sure, if he's able to get off to a bit of a lead before he has to deal with the Cupid, then it might not be that big of a deal. But, oh, it's the Nike coming out. I thought we left the Nikes behind the Arsino, but it looks like that's not going to be the case. The where the Erlong Shen's taken away, he drops down to this pick, and we have seen Nike struggle lately. Sunder has been a great response to her shield with the ability to take that away right away. How do you like the strength of Nike here in this spot?
I do not think she is worth picking at a pro level because you mentioned it. Sunder just obliterates this character. Her whole survivability is centered around having this massive health shield, and now with one relic, you just kind of flick it off of her instantly. And not only does she lose the whole shield, but then she takes more damage on the back end, and she was probably counting on that shield in order to help her survive. I just think that it's easy for Yamoja to pick something like Sunder. She doesn't feel like she needs Blink all the time. You can kind of go 2 teamfight relics. Only getting 1 teamfight relic out of her and a Sunder instead doesn't even feel that bad. I'm pretty surprised that we see the Nike here for Sino.
Me too, and the Ra not picked or banned, so Obey, I think, maybe without all that such easily applied CC, maybe that's not as strong a pick for them. Nike is strong, the slow is there, she has a knock-up too, she can land the leap, but it might not be the same as the root, as the knock-up, the taunt that's coming out from something like an Erlog Shen. So this is interesting. Obey, with a heavily team-fight-focused draft here up against SSG with a good deal of survivability. Which one do you see coming out on top?
I think SSG came away with a fantastic draft. Their draft just feels so much stronger to me. Their picks, I mean, you just look at Hera, I think is a much stronger mage in terms of what the kit does than Raijin. Right now, Erlong Shen far stronger than Nike in my mind. It's really on if Cherio gets completely neutralized by this Cupid ultimate, by the Kuzenbo disruption, then I think Obey really does have a win condition. But it's got to be through stopping Cherio from doing what he wants to do. Because if Cherry gets to play this game like he doesn't have bad matchups on the other side, I don't see a world in which Obey wins.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy here for Obey at all, and it's depending on how quickly can inbound start to affect the way that Cheerio is going to play the game, right? When can Wowie start to get involved? Because sometimes as hunters, it feels like you rotate in, and the game is kind of already out of reach, so it really just depends on how that mid 3v3 for Obey stands up here, up against SSG, but we will have to wait no longer. Game number 1, I'll get it down to Dolson and Myth.
Always appreciated, Finch and Aggro. Time to dive into the one and only set we've got for you here today. Obey up against SSG. Dolson, Mifflin, Doug working the camera for us here. And you at home, feel free to cast your vote in chat. Let us know what way you're leaning here for this big matchup. Mifflin, a big heat check here, I think, for Obey. We saw a fantastic game from them last week, a fantastic set from them last week. The 2-0, the clean win. This is a big one. This is a heat check for the SSG squad going up, or Obey rather, going up against SSG.
Man, I agree, and it's interesting to point out that like they're just playing a different playstyle, a different overall team composition. Obey, that is, after they have a fantastic showing on gods like Erlang and knocking Wolfie onto the Ra, you'd expect them to try and replicate that playstyle of just have Wolfie on this very hard to hit ultimate god that's got huge damage potential, put Sino on something with a little bit of setup and work it that way. Instead now, we're getting Sino going back on his word. He promised the community, the casters, the pros that he was going to, put warriors on the shelf and then he's going to lock in this Nike like we don't remember. I'll be interested to see how it pans out, but Aggro makes a really good point. Sunder now completely neutralizes this character. That shield doesn't exist. The engage potential, the backline dive, it's going to be so much harder to perform on. And by that same note, Obey gave SSG a team comp that screams SSG. When's the last time Dardes was allowed to play Hera? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been effectively permabanned against Dardes in most of the SSG sets. It's a good point about that Sunder. We might have to return to that point in just a moment as Wolfie has been pinned back against the wall here by Cherio. An early first blood for SSG. Cherio, we were worried about whether Obey's draft would limit what this Erlong Shen wants to do, and we might not get there if this pace keeps up. That's the up-down from Sino. Cherio still on the attack. The disarm going to be enough to slow down Cherio. Dardes plugs some damage. It's the first blood, and you force Sino back.
And that was Wolfie getting aggressive in the enemy jungle. They were looking to go for that red invade. You couldn't pay me to fight an Erlang Shen at level 2. That's just so much pressure.
Oh, that's a good stun. Down onto Vote. The beads forced out. Wow, he doesn't have the range. One auto. Oh, the nade he does so from range. Inbound. Puts down Vote. Obey equalize here with some good kill pressure early on in the long lane.
Man, Inbound might just be one of the most improved players in the league, full stop. That's a hard to hit shot. That's hard to set up that damage. Not only do they find the kill, but they also get his beads off as well, meaning that Vote's going to rotate back in a lane and struggle into this high kill composition in the duo. Cupid plus Kuzenbo is hard to deal with even when you have your defensive relics available. Without them, I imagine we see a lot of pressure over there. It's going to be a while until Inbound rotates out.
Yeah, getting any sort of lead over a Yamoja Ram is absolutely going to be a win for Obey. I'll hesitate just to see what Cherio's maybe looking for here. Blue buff timer relatively equal to what Space Station Gaming have going on their side as well. Cheerio instead maybe just looking back for the blue buff invade. Could be a fight on the back end of this one, but we talked a little bit about Sunder Mifflin not picked up by Raffer, first relic overall. Instead it's at Heavenly Wings. What does that tell you about maybe what SSG are looking for in the long lane?
I think it just means that they're looking to avoid getting hit by Fields of Love. Heavenly Wings, just pop that, walk on out of it, or maybe potentially re-engage. I think with Nike on the enemy team, especially in the jungle role, you don't really have to concern yourself with that team fight phase or ultimate really being that disruption factor in the backline until you really get to around level 12. I'd be surprised if Rapper doesn't pick up Sunder as the second relic.
Well, it's going to be difficult now for this SSG long lane, especially now that Vote does not have beads anymore. One stun connects from inbound or Wowie, and the kill pressure absolutely massive. So Raffer now in an interesting spot, Mifflin, not necessarily fully behind, still equal as far as levels go. But the Emoja not as free, maybe, to exert some of that early game pressure from what we've seen. Now Vote left alone. He doesn't have the beats here. It's going to be a stun down onto the ROM. Do they have the damage? They sure should. And he's going to try to tangle back with Wowie here. The final auto's just connecting these early game hunters. They're not going to get it done quickly, and the kill goes through for inbound.
Man, Vote just kind of stood there and allowed inbound to walk up to him, set up the Nene, set up the push. I mean, well played, hiding inside the minion wave to try and turn around that fight. After he got hit by the initial push, there's really no way he's going to escape that situation, so he has to go for the counterplay. Just doesn't quite pan out for him. And now this duo lane, man, it's going to be tough. Cupid, level 5, 1 level up. Inbound 2-0, going to be able to finish his boots incredibly quickly, allowed to rotate out at any point if he so chooses. It's going to be really tough to see SSG make a comeback in that lane. But Raffer piloting a Yamoja, being one of the highest pressure supports in the game, having a little bit of sustain in the kit, huge team fight potential. I'm sure this Yamoja's not sweating it too much just yet.
Well, we were talking about the drafts, right, and kind of you and I passively watching it before we come into game here, and agreed largely with what the desk said, and that SSG are very happy with what they've got, and we are happy with what SSG have. That's another invade successful there for Cheerio onto Ducky's blue buff. But kind of a couple of the saving graces for Obey. One of them was Wowie on this Cupid, and now off to a fantastic start. So Vote playing maybe not level behind, but a little bit net worth behind early on here in this game. Now we started to reach that point, though, Mifflin, where Cheerios hit that level 6. The 9 turns Blessing is going to start coming online. This is where Obey need to be a little extra cautious maybe about that jungle pressure, especially with the blink for Cheerio to start to push out a little bit earlier on here.
Rafford drops his ultimate in pure fear. The second inbound steps up to that purple buff. And you're right to point out that Cheerio is going to get involved pretty early on. Normally, we see Erlang Shen go for that golden blade in the early game to boost that farm potential a little bit. But because Cheerio was able to get aggressive for that first blood, now he goes immediately into Ninja Tab Eye, allowing him to get involved in these fights a lot earlier on. That movement speed and attack speed is going to be hugely impactful. It means that he's playing this Erlang Shen more so as a very early game pressure warrior, a la something like Robin or something along those lines, instead of this late game auto attacker, just absolute beast for shred.
Well, I guess and kind of counter to that, Sino on this Nike, don't necessarily always see that assassin-esque build on the Nike out of the jungle. I mean, we talked to Sino and we said, you know, you're playing Erlang Shen, technically classed as a warrior, but you build him more as an assassin. I'm not sure you can say the same about the Nike, but she does have engage potential. Sentinel of Zeus drops down, but Argus is there to peel back this fight, and SSG happy to take it. They lose barely any health. Sino and Wolfie limping away with about half HP.
And when they're red buff spawning as well, they're just going to let that one go. It's not an easy matchup for Nike into this fight just in general. Hera's got a very easy time with the polymorph, disrupting the channeled ability, as does Wolfie. Now Cheerio rotating through the enemy jungle, trying to see if he can strip anything away. Sino doing the exact same. That's a good play from Obey to try and tear back just a little bit of the farm that got stripped away from SSG.
That's right, SSG don't have ward coverage on their own red buff, so didn't sense out that Sino was half HP on the SSG red buff side of the map. Wolfie looking for a little poke here. Maybe sensing a collapse. Ducky's going to rotate over from solo as well. This is the Cthulhu. Dash in immediately polymorphed out by Dardes.
Nice
River's
gold.
Rebuke will separate out this fight. Inbound has locked down Raffer, but beneath the tier 1 tower, 10% HP across the board for Space Station Gaming. Sino, there's the up down, and he's got the damage to get rid of Cheerio. One more polymorph though. Dardes has some damage. Nika has to front line here because everyone else is too low.
Nice
Blinks
blink.
exchanged across the board, and Obey walk away with one.
That's clean play. Ducky's rotation in there was so perfect. Just gets in there right in time to separate the team fight, forces them back up into their tower. Cheerio tries to get a little bit greedy and go for farm at such a low health bar. Sino already in that side of the jungle from invading the red. Means that that's a free kill going his way as well. Cheerio does successfully steal away the speed buff to the chagrin of Sino. Going to be a little bit harder for him to find farm on the map. And even though Obey do win the team fight, they're not really able to do much off the tail end of it, leaving up the majority of SSG's jungle. Cherry's just going to respawn, go ahead and clear his speed. It's a nice play for Obey to get a little bit of farm back in their favor, but it doesn't really amount to too much.
Yeah, we are relatively even still up to this point. SSG even has about a 200-300 gold lead up to this point in this game. Watch out for Inbound. Around the back side, he's going to be looking for some damage onto Rapper here. There are beads for Vote, but not for the Emoja. Through the Riptide, she'll go. And Rapper has been largely mitigated this game by Inbound playing hyper-aggressive. Got a couple of kills under the belt of this Kuzenbo, and the Obey long lane continues to put out pressure.
Yeah, Inbound is not leaving the long lane. He loves it over there, playing around with his Cupid. That's a huge matchup for them. Yeah, he's popping off right now. Might as well continue to help him out, just really facilitate the damage output from this Kuzenbo. Vote's gotta be feeling the pressure.
Well, he sure is now. Has to use the ultimate. There are beads on the back end of this fight, but just going to do some damage as Sino will pick up his second kill of the game. Small collapse. Rotation in from SSG. Rapper has only locked in one, and it's Inbound this time around, who will use his ultimate. Slowly trembled. Riptide back from Rapper. Big play here. Dardes will collapse in for the final kill, so SSG able to pull one back.
And the Soul Laners were already starting the rotation out in case that team fight goes any worse. But the fight continues. You got caught out, Wolfie.
Argus swinging away here, and Rapper will tally his first of the game with some damage on the back end of the fight. There's the power of Dardes rotating out of this mid lane. Argus, kind of that pseudo fourth man there in that dive. Now, a little bit of extra damage, just enough to give SSG another advantage.
Man, that's a tough one. SSG look like they're just on an absolute warpath. Because the Soul Laners decided to rotate back after the initial skirmish in the long lane, it doesn't really open up the opportunity for Gold Fury to go either way for either team. But I imagine we're getting to that point. It's already level 10 for Cheerio. They're starting to get a lot of their damage items online. Kin size already up for the Erlang Shen. They can start now to look towards these objectives. They can look for the Gold Fury. There's so much burn potential from both teams. Any team fight can result in that.
Obey are going to try to pull the gold lead back with a little bit of fighting of their own, but the tier 2 tower enough of a safe haven to get SSG. That's Nika and Cheerio out alive. All of this for a blue buff invade. Nika hanging close by, pinned against the wall. Inbound will use his ultimate as well, but takes to the sky for a little extra healing. Obey burn a couple of ultimates there, but able to lock down the blue buff.
But they commit so many ultimates themselves. Inbound and Ducky losing out on theirs is the best team fight tools that I think they have. Just you need that Beyblade ultimate from the Kuzenbo to disrupt the backline. Ducky playing Cthulhu. I don't really need to sing the praises of the god of infinite knockups. So now the team fight potential is going to be a lot lower. We're not going to see those aggressive rotations from Ducky until that ultimate's back up. Maybe we see SSG try and push that lead a little bit and force a fight in the 3v3 in mid.
Well, not just yet. I mean, the big lead now, really for Obey, is over in this long lane. It's not even all that large necessarily, even on levels, maybe a half level ahead is Wowie. But 0-3-0 for Vote, I mean, call it, what, 40-something stacks behind on the Devourer's Gauntlet. So that's where most of the pressure for Obey has gone. 3 of the 4 kills have been onto Vote. And Myth, I'm not sure they've necessarily held him behind, at least if you look at items. You know, being a little bit behind on your Devos is one thing, but he's held himself quite well in the long lane.
A lot of that's due to the fact that Inbound's been hovering around this long lane so much, whereas Raffer's been spending a lot more time rotating. Even though they are getting a couple of kills, they're just splitting so much.
This is how you want to engage. Sino's just going to leap in onto Vote, who has to use the ultimate, but the fight's going to continue elsewhere. Inbound will end up cleaning up Vote. 0-4 now for the SSG Hunter. You have committed a lot. It's a Sentinel of Zeus down. Dardes has dropped down Argus as well. Both teams kind of positioning around this Gold Fury, but looks like won't go much further. Cherio has the 9 turns blessing, and when it's all said and done, a clean kill onto Vote, and Obey are able to get out alive.
Obey doing a very good job keeping pressure up over here, but as you said earlier, Vote's still not that far behind, and because SSG's had so much time just to farm up in mid, take a peek at Dardez. He's got about a 1.5 level lead. He's been allowed to free farm, no deaths under his belt. I mean, this Argus has already been chunking. He's been playing this rotation role. Dardez is playing all over the map, and he's had no pressure put towards him. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that Sino playing this Nike just has a poor matchup in mid. I mean, you can't use that first ability, you'll just get polymorphed out of it, and that's the majority of the damage output. Maybe we just see Dardez be continually allowed to free farm.
Yeah, it has been difficult. These fights really seem to have shifted once Dardez joins the fight, and haven't had the same pressure with Wolfie rotating in just yet. The Raijin definitely a staple in the Obey mid laner's God pool. But you can say the absolute same and then some maybe about Dardez here on this Hera. So a 2-level lead out of the mid, and really just thanks to a couple of skirmishes for Dardez. Big damage as well. Going to add Spear of Desolation on the back end of that Divine Ruin early on. I mean, Dardez is going to be absolutely swinging in these fights, and Argus is just going to compound that issue for Obey.
So much damage coming out from Dardez. It's an expensive build that he's just been allowed to have. Take a peek at what we're seeing from Wolfie. He's going a much cheaper path, Divine Ruin. Likely going to be a Soul Gem next for the Raijin. He's 0-2, had a ton of pressure put on him. There's just so much potential now for either team to force a singular engagement and then immediately move into the Gold Fury. Cherio picking up this Wingblade is going to mitigate a little bit of the damage output, but it is going to make it much easier to stick to these backliners.
Well, the 9 turns blessing for Cherio doesn't find anything, and instead it's Wolfie who grabs the opening kill onto Dardez. A great dive from Obey. Tycho drums on the back end of the fight. Space Station Gaming still looking to collapse. River's Rebuke and then a stun. Over on the inbound, and the Kuzenbo has been locked in off to the side, but Wolfie can still do damage without the ultimate, and Ducky can as well. That's the knock-up onto Rapper beneath the Tier 1 tower, and the Yemoja able to stay alive on the back end. Nika will use his ultimate as well. I wonder if the chase may be still on here from SSG, but instead Obey are going to pull back towards the Gold Fury.
And there's only one ultimate left available, and it's Wowie with the Fields of Love. If SSG decide to move in here and fight for it, they're going to be fighting into a deficit, not just because of the numbers advantage, but because of the ults.
Oh, Obey able to peel away the Gold Fury. Cherio was there looking for the pin to lock it down. And it's really been these singular picks, Mifflin, where Obey are able to just find that one kill. There's kind of this big cluster of a team fight. And it's just one kill that ends up tumbling from it, but SSG have to use so much on the defensive, they lose so much of their health, that they can't do anything on the other side. So, big win there for Obey, but the thing to look at is that that evens up the gold lead. SSG were 2K ahead. We're right back to even here, so Obey doing a good job of clawing their way back in.
Yeah, 1 or 2K ahead while constantly being down 1, 2, or 3 kills. SSG is just kind of playing the map a little bit better, splitting the farm a little bit more efficiently. They've been controlling the neutral objectives really well, but Obey's rotations into these team fights, and it's mainly off the back of Ducky just getting there first and immediately forcing all of those ultimates or relics defensively, as you pointed out earlier. It's kind of hard to not be scared with Cthulhu, who's literally the size of a skyscraper and knocking you up back to back. So you have to use those to just escape out of those situations. Rapper gets TKO'd at the very beginning of that fight, so now you don't even have really any of the sustain in your draft working for you. Obey's doing a good job targeting out those priority targets and then moving on to the objectives.
Right, I mean, as difficult as it is, and we've talked about how Sunder kind of counters out that Nike, you've got the other massive target to deal with, and that's the Cthulhu, and Sunder has often been used as a counter to Cthulhu. Rapper just now reaches level 12, won't be the Sunder here for SSG, instead a Frenzy. So what does that now tell you maybe about what SSG are looking to do?
Objectives, but it's not killing Sino, that's for sure.
Up to the sky goes Vote here. Rotation in from Cherio, Sentinel of Zeus, big value there. Sino on a killing spree as Wowie will help detonate that health bar. Cherio beneath the Tier 1 tower. Rapper has made his way alone into the backline here with Obey. They might just be able to turn around and melt down this Yemoja. Healthy enough, and the Riptide will escape. But it's going to be a 5 versus 2 dive beneath this Tier 1 tower. If Obey want to walk a little bit further forward for it. SSG now reinforced. It's a push back from inbound. The ultimate used as well. Cherio able to walk his way away from that one. Beads had to be used. Wolfie half HP as well. Frenzy popped this time by Rapper, but won't be used to re-engage. Looks like Obey are going to take their gold and head home.
Yeah, SSG didn't even look like they really were interested in putting up a defense for that tier 1. Instead, they keep Dardes in mid and push down the tier 1 mid tower, which is much more valuable. That's going to open up the map so much for SSG. But Obey is doing a really good job of pushing their lead. They've grouped up really well. They're roaming around as this 5-man deathball anytime they group up on anything that's remotely dangerous. They get a tier 1 tower, they get a couple of kills, but still the gold lead hasn't grown at all. 7-3 is the slash line, and we're only looking at about 200 gold separating these teams, despite Obey picking up a gold fury as well. It's looking tough. They're having a hard time finding farm on the map.
Right, I mean, most of that, gold differential at this point, maybe even the XP, has to go towards Vote. He's 0-5. He's 5 of the 7 deaths that Obey have had. The game plan is clear, and it's jump on Vote continuously. But then what do you do on the back end of that has been the common question. SSG have always been there to put up a fight. You look over at the solo lane as well. Nika, a 1-level lead over Ducky, able to knock down the tier 1 tower in that lane. So that keeps SSG a little bit closer in the gold conversation as well. The engagement has been pretty clear as well from Obey. You got Sino, the big up-down with that Sentinel of Zeus has just locked down the priority targets. And you wonder now, I mean, SSG still may be in a comfortable spot, Mifflin, as far as gold and XP goes. But you wonder if that Sunder is going to make it a little bit, or lack of Sunder rather, is going to make it too difficult to deal with Sino, who's 3-0-2, 2 levels ahead of Cherio.
It seems like instead of going Sunder, they're electing to have Vote go the Tank Buster build, whereas Wowie is going a more crit-centric build, but Sunder would have helped so much more. Now, Sino's allowed to up-down, completely brainless, drooling, and drop the ultimate and not have to worry about anything, instead of, having to be concerned about just losing out on it if he's in the wrong spot.
Inbound is going to push back. Dardes here, so tanky. This is Kuzumbo. There's the Sentinel of Zeus. Dardes has to pop the actives. He'll walk his way away from Rapper's ultimate. And Rapper grabs the kill onto Wowie. Cupid was alone on the left-hand side of this fight. And Volt was there to help out with some damage as well. Argus, now the one chasing down Sino, blinks on in. Sino has to leap up and over, but Nika waiting around the side. The snipes down from the back line from Volt will supply some damage and a kill. SSG pull back a couple. Ducky has to pop the thorns beneath the tier 2 tower, and SSG finds 2.
And Oni Fury spawns just now. That's unfortunate timing for Obey. SSG are going to have the absolute advantage working their way in there. Nika knows that having 2 members down on Obey means that he can rotate over solo and potentially take down this tower, or at least force someone from Obey to rotate over and make their team fight that much weaker. Obey's not able to really do much on the map. They can't go to Pyromancer because all of their damage is dead. And it all starts because Wowie's just a little bit too aggressive with his positioning, gets caught out immediately by Raffer's ultimate, and Ducky was too slow on the rotation, didn't even get a chance to use his ultimate. That's tough. And Ducky's been doing such a good job rotating in previous parts of the game that you're surprised to see it. It's partially the reason he's a couple levels down. He hasn't spent nearly as much time in lane, but it's working out just fine for him up until this point.
The main target for Obey, that's been Vote this game, now a 1-level lead over Wowie, his counterpart, and even overtook him in the gold department. So the early game pressure expended onto this ROM did pay off, maybe in slowing down Space Station, but not enough. Vote has been able to catch back up, and then some. Small dive here onto Dardes. Wolfie is going to thunder crash his way in. Tycho drums. Dardes stays alive, but not for long. Sino, 4 kills on the board, and another well-executed dive here. The presence has shifted for Obey, maybe from the long lane over towards getting Dardes back in base for a little bit longer.
Any kill that you get at this point is hugely impactful. That's 40 seconds that Dardes isn't going to be able to farm. I'd have liked to see Obey try and push this lead, move themselves into the Pyromancer, move themselves into just about any objective instead of just hovering around the jungle a little bit, especially considering not only did they take Dardes' life, but Raffer's ultimate as well. That's one of the best teamfight ultimates they have. If they have Ducky rotate in or Wowie rotate out, it would be very easy for them to do exactly this, group up on an objective, force SSG to either respond or get it for free.
SSG are responding, but will it be in time? The answer is no. Obey, take away the Pyromancer, and as well are going to be able to get out alive. Maybe we realize, or maybe Dardes realizes that there's extra pressure starting to be applied towards the mid lane. A Bulwark of Hope in the build now for this Hera. There's one over for inbound as well. Mifflin, we're starting to see this item kind of creep into builds a little bit more often nowadays. That extra shield may be enough to keep Dardes alive. Obviously, going to pair well with the rest of his kit. So what do you think of Dardes adding that one? We'll maybe have to return, see what happens to inbound here, and he will be able to escape. So Dardes adding the Bulwark into the item rotation.
I mean, it's just a pretty strong stat stick in general. If memory serves, 60 magic defense, 250 health, 20% CCR, something along those lines. That's incredibly strong just on its own. The ability to survive in these team fights and the passive compounded by the fact that Dardes is just going to have a shield within his kit as well means that he's almost rocking a pseudo Nike look. He's going to have so much functional health that the enemy team's going to have to burn through while simultaneously having a ton of self-peel tools through Polymorph and the Argus is going to make it much harder for Sino to get value diving the backline or even for Ducky's damage once he transforms to be really impactful. I think it's a pretty smart pickup, and as far as stat sticks goes, it's pretty strong in of itself.
Maybe it's Obey that needed the Sunder here this game to deal with Dardes at some point. They were able to execute kind of the up-down there. Sino is paired very well with Wolfie up to this point, very well with inbound as well. Lots of executed kind of solo picks for the Obey jungler up to this point. 100% kill participation we talked about in the Obey win last week up against the Renegade. Sino obviously going to be difficult to keep that pace, but 6 out of 8, definitely not bad at all. Inbound right there as well. Unfortunately, could fall another time here. But Myth, both teams may be slowing down this game a little bit.
There's not really much to fight over on the map right now. We know SSG is a team that is very comfortable taking the game as long as they want to. I would expect to see Obey try and keep up the pace, try and find some pressure somewhere on the map, and then rotate in towards an objective, the only one left on the map being that Fire Giant. This mid tower is really concerning if you're an Obey fan. This tier 1 and mid being up at 24 minutes means that any objective that Obey wants to take is going to be that much harder. If they group up on Gold Fury and force Space Station to retreat, well, they've got a Bash and a safety in mid. The same can be said of Pyromancer and Fire Giant, whereas Dardes has already taken the enemy mid tower. It's going to be much easier for them to make a little bit more aggressive plays and just make use of that Yemoja healing. I think it's going to be very concerning to see where Obey decide to group up and put their pressure once this Primal Fury respawns. They could decide to group up there immediately and take the team fight on the objective, or they could try and split the map a little bit, take a couple of towers and force that trade, or even move to Fire Giant. There's a lot of counterplay potential. This game's nearly completely even.
It does seem that way. Gold right about that 1,000 mark, but we're starting to crest over towards those level 20s. Builds starting to get rounded out here. Dardes is going to finish off at least his 5th item outside of the Blessing with that Chronos pendant. So swinging out a few more punches a little bit more often. Always going to be good for Dardes here. Fury is back in respawn. You can tell Obey kind of pivoting themselves over to the left-hand side here. Inbound finds his way into the backline. Look at that shield from Dardes. Inbound not able to do much. Ducky has been melted through a 9 turns Blessing to slow down inbound here. Taiko drums as well. Answered from Wolfie. Thunder Crash. That one's in. Dardes has to use the actives, but the Hera's still alive. Finally, Obey able to find that opening kill. Rapper low on the backline. 4-man stun from Nika. Next Mantle of Discord, and that's going to slow down the fight enough for Vote to toggle a kill, and another one goes for Nika as well. 2-for-2 trade as we stand. Nika now locked down, snipes down from Vote, but he crashes back down to earth, and Sino rampages through this game. Nika will pull back a 3rd, and it's an even fight.
Man, Dardes spent so much time alive there. Obey should have likely just lost the fight due to all the abilities they decided to sink into the mid laner, but you pointed out already, the shielding from her kit, the shielding from Bulwark, the healing coming through from Rapper, all just kept him alive through so much, and it ends up being 3 for 3. No one's going to get anything off of that. Both teams are going to have to go back to the drawing board and revisit how they approach these team fights. I mean, my eyes that entire time were glued to Cherry, trying his absolute hardest to find auto attack damage, but Aggro pointed out earlier, Erlang Shen into this team comp is going to have a very hard time in these team fights. Ducky continually knocking up, Sino with a disarm, Inbound playing that Beyblade role. There's just so much that he's got to work through in order to find these auto attacks. If you were playing something a little bit more ability centric, it might have been easier to find the damage, but Cherio's doing just fine in general. It's about how well they're able to separate these team fights. If Obey can keep them in grouped up 5-on-5 engagements, they're going to be able to mitigate a lot of the strengths of Erlang Shen.
Yeah, just a few hundred damage behind Sino at 504 on the other side. I don't think Cherio up to this point has maybe found a 9 turns Blessing he's super thrilled with. It's been a lot of kind of peeling off this front line. Hasn't been able to be used super aggressively maybe on some of those squishier, mid-squishy backline targets just yet. Primal Fury still stands though. That's the big objective. These two teams are going to dance over now. Started up by Obey. Nika, Rapper, both here to play. Sino around the backside as well. Could find Dardes. No actives. Inbound. He blinks through. Vote will take to the skies. Buy himself some time. Snipe down. What direction does he decide to go? Off to the side. Vote stays alive. The peel from the rest of the team good enough. Ducky still on the chase. Cherio, he's been left alone with Sino. Grabs the kill there. Vote still alive. Look at the healing.
Nice healing.
Ducky not able to get it. It's a double kill for Cherio elsewhere. Ducky not able to get it done. SSG find a big fight, and they break this game open.
That's the issue, man. If Obey can't keep SSG grouped up as 5, they're not going to be able to win the team fight. We saw that there were 2 separate engagements, a 2 versus 3 in the back line for Obey, and then the 3 versus 2 in the front line. Cherry, when he's able to separate himself from all those CC centers on the side of Obey, is absolutely going to run amok in the team fight. 3,000 damage coming out from just him there, and then Rapper able to peel back and make sure that Vote doesn't fall down to Ducky. I mean, clean play from SSG. They deserve this Fire Giant.
God, and that is nuts. Sino and Inbound found their way like free and clear onto Dardes and weren't even able to get the kill. He didn't have his actives up until just now, and Dardes was able to stay alive. Vote as well. A lot of the targeting going towards Vote, who just used the snipes to buy some time. Falling off a cliff are the gold and XP differentials here. 16,000 in the XP department, as little as that might mean at this point in the game. 11,000 gold, seemingly all at once. Everything stripped away from Obey. The Pyromancer, the Fire Giant, now the tower in the mid lane, the long lane being looked at. Short lane has just a little bit left on this tier 2 tower. So we're starting to look towards the Phoenix defense for Obey and how comfortable they might be underneath their birds.
Yeah, just to contextualize how big of a swing that was, going into that team fight, SSG was only 2,000 gold up and barely ahead in experience, but after all of those objectives, it's absolutely nuts, and there's still plenty of passive gold on the map. 2 tier 2 towers, the ability to siege definitely favors SSG, just having Nika and Cherry diving the backline. Dardes and Vote Rapper can play this own backline and peel for each other while simultaneously dealing damage from a range. The objective structure damage is going to come through very easily, whereas Obey, with their draft having so much dive potential, they're sacrificing a little bit in the poke department, meaning that if they want to really put up a defense on these Phoenixes, it's not going to be an elongated battle. I imagine we see Obey immediately go for a dive once SSG groups up on the Phoenix line.
Yeah, Obey not going to step a toe out of base just yet. We'll have to see what split SSG opt for. Cherio definitely strong enough here. Has a serrated edge to round out his build, so can sustain himself up just a little bit extra. He's going to go toe-to-toe with Sino alone on the right-hand side. Rotates over. 3 men fighting on both sides here on the left-hand side. Phoenix, Wowie taken down to half HP. Vote will use the snipes here, looking for Wolfie, and he's got him. Wowie trembled out as well. It's Inbound using the ultimate to try to slow down this fight, but instead it's just a double kill for Vote. Left side Phoenix goes down. Sino up, down, onto Cheerio, but it's a triple kill for the ROM that's been sat on all game long. SSG find a fight, find the left side Phoenix, and Mifflin, they may have just found the game.
Ducky still has ultimate. There is a potential for defense here, but it's not looking good. All 3 Phoenixes down.
No chance. That's it. The Titan is going to crumble here. What a fight from SSG, and what a turnaround they found. Even a little fountain diving towards the end. This one dead even for the majority of the game, Mifflin. And then it's that one Fury fight. You get a near clean 5-0 for Space Station Gaming. And it was only a matter of time at that point. As much time as it takes to go back, spend your gold, and get back out onto the map. And we knew that that's what the draft for SSG had the potential to do to Obey the more this game went on.
Man, I feel bad for Vote having to sit through 25 minutes of getting absolutely camped. Inbound barely rotates out of lane. Nike's there nearly constantly. They found a ton of kills, but they at most put him 1 level down. And then Vote at the very tail end gets a little bit of catharsis, picks up a triple kill, and then drops the fattiest lap spam I think I've ever heard. Props to him, props to SSG being able to fight into that incredibly aggressive playstyle brought by Obey. But I think the real storyline is, Obey looked highly competitive there against the team that even just a couple moments ago aggro hailed as the best in the league. I mean, this is a new Obey.
I think so. Right. The fact that they're able to keep pace. You know, the Obey of past would have crumbled a little bit earlier here, so they've kept themselves in at this set far from over. A couple fights go Obey's way, and they're the ones knocking down the Titan. But it's SSG in just over 30 minutes that take game number 1. We won't go back to the desk this time. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, feast your eyes on the SMITE Maxonomic Chair.
You have yet to see the meaning of cruel.
Let the heavens rage!
The Maxonomic SMITE chair providing unprecedented comfort. Sleek, pristine, and optimized to give you the support you can rarely find in your SMITE matches. Your butt deserves the best elite treatment, and you've just found it. Cushion for support. Easy sidearm adjustment. And all you need to do is go to needforseat.com. Use code SMITEMAX and be the envy of your friends with the in-game award skin. Thanks, Aggro, for giving me a little demo there at the chair that everyone can enjoy at home.
Hey, listen, I just spent so much time being comfortable in it, I thought people might not actually know what it looks like in person, so I wanted to give them a full view, you know, the full 180 showcase of the Maxonomic chair in all its glory.
They did them a great service there, Aggro, and a great service there for SSG as they were able to find the win over Obey. I mean, you and I were talking back and forth during this game about how Obey looked excellent, especially inbound, and Sino in particular had a great start to this game. We're causing all kinds of problems for Vote, but one bad team fight near a Gold Fury, and suddenly it's out of control.
It's what good teams do to you, man. They only let you make so many mistakes, and in this game it was more or less one for Obey Alliance that lost them the game. But look, I mean, the way that this duo lane was playing for Obey was fantastic. They were straight up outplaying SSG's duo lane early on. Vote didn't wake up for the first 15 to 18 minutes of this game, and then he woke up angry whenever he finally did. But this game, I feel like, could have been won by Obey if they were able to stretch that lead. I mean, they had a kill lead for a long time. Were never able to materialize a true gold lead in this game. They were keeping Dardez down. They were keeping Cherry down. Nico was hard to lock down, as is kind of traditional for Wukong. But Vote was a complete non-factor early on. Then Wowie makes one bad rotation into mid. Insta dies on top left. They need him to be the guy if he's going to be the one with the lead. If they're going to camp his lane, he's got to do more with that ball that they're basically handing over to him. And Wolfie really, really struggled in this game. 1-6-3 for him, really low on the player damage charts. Didn't even get his ult off in the last team fight. The one fight where they lose the game by Gold Fury, Wolfie jumps in with no relics and instantly gets stunned into 3 ROM snipes from Vote. This was a game to forget for Wolfie for sure.
It was, and until the very end, it was a game to forget for Vote as well, but one good team fight with that triple kill kind of brought his KDA back up towards passable, but this was one that I really thought where SSG were really reliant on Nika, Cheerio, and Dardez, as they often are, and as you alluded to, Dardez knew how much pressure he was going to be under, gets the Bulwark of Hope in the middle of his build, is just kind of desperately clinging to life, trying to live through that dive from Ducky and from Sino there in the backline, or inbound, whoever it was, they would send back there towards him. It ended up working sort of. He died still a lot, but he was able to get his damage off most times, which is really all I think they were looking for.
Especially on that final Phoenix Siege, that was such an easy fight because he just found a way to drop Argus directly on top of Wolfie, and then just Argus damage plus ROM snipes were enough to get the kill. So that's where you see how strong this Hera pick can really be. It wasn't that early game pressure that a lot of times she provides because of how well Sino and Wolfie were playing that 2v2 early on. But when it came to the team fights, I thought Dardes far outperformed Wolfie in this game.
I think so too. Let's move into those picks and bans for game number 2 because a lot of interesting stuff happened here. Remember, Space Station took away the Erlong Shin even into some bad matchups on the side of Obey, and Cheerio, I think, struggled as a result. They didn't take the Ra over here for Obey. It was the Raijin for Wolfie, and instead of the Wolfie we've seen most of the phase, as struggling, we had that guy back instead of the Wolfie that I think that had been really looking better for them with this Ra pick that we normally see from them. A lot of interesting stuff was happening in the picks and bans that I think led to a very, very good game. Obey were competitive, so I'm excited to see if they're going to make any changes or maybe try to come back in with some similar comps.
Yeah, I think that we should see something a little bit closer to what we've seen from Obey. I mean, their early game worked out pretty well, but if Wolfie's not going to be comfortable on one of his traditional signature picks, you got to try and find a way to get him comfortable because you just aren't going to win games where he does 10k damage a lot of times. So you've got to try and find a way to either pick a comp that can protect him. I think you give Inbound the Kuzenbo over and over and over again.
Yeah, he played great.
He had his best game of the phase, by my estimation. I thought he played really, really well and was a big reason why that duo lane was so far ahead. So I think you stick to those style of picks. You just got to find a way to make Wolfie a little bit more comfortable.
I think that certainly deserves to be a focus, but so far these bans looking identical to the bans of Game 1. The AMC, the Aphrodite banned away from Obey, the Olo run the Persephone. Now Obey banned away the Freya in the slot, and SSG banned away the Amaterasu. So this could be an area where we might see a little bit of a change coming into these picks and ban phases from what we saw back there in Game number 1. But so far, things are looking the same. Obey do ban that Freya away here again, and SSG very likely don't want to let that Amaterasu land over in Ducky's hands. What I'm wondering about a little bit later on is, are we going to see the Erlong for Cheerio again, or is he going to change things up? Are we going to let Dardes play this Hera again, even though he was so hard to kill? I mean, that would be a surprise to me as well if they allow him to have that one. Are we going to see the Nike come out again for Sino? Because remember, they didn't even buy the Sunder, which we so traditionally see being bought into that Nike. So maybe Sino wants to run it again, but I doubt SSG are going to make it that easy.
Yeah, I agree. I was very surprised to see no Sunder in the last game because of the fact that it was great against the Nike and so good against the Cthulhu, even if you're able to kill Sino, take him out of the fight, he's not there, whatever. So I was definitely surprised about that as well, but can't argue with results. I mean, SSG was able to get the win either way. Right. Little surprised that Obey sticks with the exact same style of bans. I mean, maybe I'm not. They played the early game pretty well, and they were off to a pretty good start. I am surprised about this. I'm a little less surprised that SSG doesn't go for the Cupid instead of the ROM just based on how that early game went. But same sort of thing, man. I mean, it ended up working out in the end, so I guess you can't blame SSG for sticking to it.
And maybe Vote will give a little bit more respect over the inbounds Kuzenbo, because that was what was really causing problems for him, constantly getting pulled back into damage from Wowie on that Cupid. And that's another one I'm a little bit surprised. Even if it wasn't, even if he does want to go back to try the ROM, maybe take that Cupid, right? I mean, Wowie's looked so comfortable on it lately and had a great game there until those very last couple of team fights, but SSG are going to try to run it back.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much. The adjustment of going no Yamoja, they pick Hera in that spot instead. This is them daring Obey to take Yamoja for themselves. And based on how well Inbound played that Kuzenbo and what we've seen out of that Yamoja pick from him in the past, I think that this makes a ton of sense. I don't know if Hera was the pick you needed in that spot, but if that's what they want to get and they don't feel like they're giving away too much in their composition, then that makes total sense to me. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. Do you want to keep Raffer on that Yamoja, I think, is the real question here for SSG.
He had some rough Rivers rebukes, right? Ones that weren't doing enough to isolate people, where they were able to squeak through those gaps that were left up against the wall when they should have been closer. So it was not the most impressive thing, and you don't necessarily have to worry about it going the other way, but SSG still take it. Now, the big change I'm going to see is I don't think Cheerio had to pick the Erlong last game. He really struggled, was not finding the normal Cheerio value we saw. Maybe they just banned it and let him take a different jungler this time.
I agree. I think that's the direction I'd want to go, because I do not think you should be giving up Erlong Shen to Sino at this point. You have to kind of ban that. This like Raven ban is a good ban against a lot of junglers. When was the last time we've seen Sino play Raven? I don't know if he ever has. Like, make him show you a Raven before you end up giving up something like the Erlong in that banning phase. That Raven ban was kind of a head scratcher for me in game number 1, and it's still the same here in game number 2.
Oh, I like this adjustment from Obey, though. Nika did have a good game on that Wukong, and with SSG already banning the Ama earlier on, back in the first ban phase, and you having the Cthulhu, this does limit those solo lane picks. Now, Achilles, King Arthur, these are still strong picks, certainly, for him to take, but I kind of like them taking a bit of a shot at Nika and making him come in and play something different that he's not necessarily in a rhythm in already.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you kind of let him take things like King Arthur if he wants, and that's kind of the direction Obey is going here. You've already got a lot of disruptive elements for King Arthur. I mean, Fields of Love is really annoying for him to deal with. Now, Nika did go beads in game number 1, and so he's clearly willing to do that in order to get his damage off and not be interrupted. But I think you're still kind of okay with that if you're on Obey.
Wow.
Nem open, SSG again don't take it, and again I feel like they feel like they need to take this Erlong to take it away from Sino, but that's why I like banning it in that same slot. The Raven pick here for Cherio would be sick, and we know Cherry has a Raven. Still don't think I can remember at least Sino playing it.
And he'll certainly play this Nemesis, right? I mean, I can't think of any good reasons why he wouldn't. Now, obviously, we can't come down too hard on SSG for this draft because it literally just got through working for them moments ago. But it did feel as though it was more of an uphill battle, maybe than it should have been. Remember, they were down 7-3 in the kills, but tied in gold. They kept that game even farming-wise. It's just no reason, I don't think, to give Obey all those early game kills and a chance at momentum. But look at this. Wolfie can be playing the Soul or maybe the Cupid here. I guess Cupid mid makes more sense.
We've seen Wolfie pick out the Soul before, though, and with Wowie on your team, I don't think you're taking that away from him. Cabrakan in the solo lane is interesting here from SSG. Also, it could be Erlong solo, Cabrakan jungle.
Right.
I think we'd likely see the Cabrakan in the solo lane, though. It gets interrupted by Cthulhu 3 on the Tremors. That's a little bit annoying, but now you don't need to channel it that whole period of time because it groups up the wave pretty quickly. I think this pick can be very good. Very annoying for Nemesis to deal with. He's slow immune when he has the 1 on. That wall can cause her problems. I love this final pick, Cabrakan, here for SSG. I think it fits really well. And again, I just don't think Soul is a particularly good mid lane god right now. I just don't think that it has the tools to out-trade something like a Hera on the other side. I don't see this composition working a whole lot better here for Obey.
Yeah, these walls for SSG are going to cause all these dash-centered characters a lot of problems here, right? The Emoja walls, the Cabrakan ultimate too, they should be getting a lot of value out of trapping them in and then dropping Argus on their head from Dardes. Obey and SSG, game number 2. Dolson, take it from here.
Well, Mifflin, we are a few picks shy of the old run back here from both teams. Still, Cthulhu, Kuzenbo, Cupid for Obey. They're going to slot in the Nemesis and Soul, of course, and then 4 out of 5 the same for SSG. They're going to take the old Cabrakan there in the solo lane. I mean, I guess based on game 1, Miff, we got to be excited about what SSG are bringing into game 2.
I mean, yeah, I mean, they've won the first game, absolutely, but I think I have the exact same concerns that Aggro did in that they could have changed their draft just a little bit to clean up that early game, especially considering that they were down 4 kills, 7-3, I think was the slash line. They maintained a 2,000 gold lead, but I think if they were able to just transition it a little bit better, find some easier to execute on junglers, especially ability-based junglers, they would have had a much easier time at the early. I think now that Rapper's got a little bit of time to warm up on this Yemoja, we're not going to see him struggle nearly as much with those ultimates. Obey Alliance, having no leaps on their team, the only one able to get through any of the walls is going to be Wolfie on this Soul. It's going to take a longer time for the Disapparate to really come through. I'd be surprised if we don't see a Phantom get picked up at some point.
Well, the big change I think that SSG would like to avoid would be Vote coming out of lane 0-4, 0-5, whatever he was in game number 1. You're always going to have to play a little bit extra defensively, I should say, against this Kuzenbo and Cupid. We saw exactly what Wowie and Inbound were able to do. It was a lot of this, blink forward, pull Vote back in. This time, the Heart Bomb will connect over onto Rapper, so no kill there. I mean, I think you look at SSG and we talk about cleaning up that early game. Maybe it's just a win, as long as Vote can stay alive.
I mean, even if last game was the worst case scenario for SSG's duo lane, I don't
close.
think I even care a little bit. I mean, Vote was one level down at most. He was able to maintain the gold perfectly. There wasn't really much that came of Obey putting that much pressure on Duo. If anything, I want Obey to maybe look towards solo, look towards mid, find pressure there, make sure that Dardes isn't allowed to free farm for the first 18 minutes like he was last time. We've seen now that shutting down Vote doesn't work. This man rotated out and found a triple kill and then laugh spammed you in your fountain. Kill him all you want. He's going to be able to transition very easily into the mid game.
It's just because I'm curious. What do you think that is, though? I mean, if you really look at what happened in Game 1, there should have been such a lead over Vote. I mean, what is it? Is it, you know, maybe there's the matchup into Cupid that kept Vote relevant throughout that game despite dying basically on cooldown?
I think it majoritarily was due to the fact that Inbound was kind of required to be there if they wanted to continually find those kills, but because he was there and Raffer was spending so much more time in mid, it's a two-way split for the farm for Obey's duo lane, whereas Vote's sitting there, sure he's dying, but when he respawns, he goes and solos 3 more waves, dies again, does it again, respawns, solos 3 more waves. He's not splitting his farm nearly as much, so the XP deficit wasn't really allowed to grow. The gold might have even favored him at certain points. I think if you want anything to work out, it's got to be a gank.
Look at this skirmish, a 1-level lead for Sino. Cheerio left down beneath half HP. This could be the free first blood for Ducky. The polymorph feels. Oh, Cheerio blinks away. He stays alive. But now Dardes being chased down.
Nice route.
In the walk away from Cheerio may be enough. That's the slow now onto Dardes. Polymorph maybe close to coming off cooldown, but not close enough. Ducky finally chases down one. Now Cheerio is still here. It's beads used from Wolfie. Dardes has gone down, and Ducky locked in by the Trembles. The Cthulhu slowly walking himself away. I wonder, Myth, how much longer this chase goes on. It's a return invade from Obey onto the SSG blue buff.
And Nika's just so slow in the rotation, but Ducky getting locked down here, trading out a lot of health to Wolfie. Cheerio sticking around. You're low health, bud.
Wait, so is Ducky. This is chaos right now as Ducky will dash his way away. Nika had the stun. Skabraken could definitely do some great early game damage, but Ducky able to turn it around mostly as well. That's a lot to recap there, Mifflin. So there was an attempted blue buff invade from SSG. Cheerio 1 level down. Sino wins that duel. That chase continues. Dardes rotates in to try to help. He dies. Then there's another blue buff invade. This time Obey successfully invade the SSG blue buff. So Obey got to be happy. They got to be thrilled with the way this game has started. And look at what they've built up. Already a 1,000 gold lead.
Man, you stole the whole recap from me, Dave. I was ready for it. I took notes.
I was just saying what's on the screen. You can tell me. Break it down. Tell me why it happened.
Well, we saw immediately Cheerio decides to engage on a Sino despite being a level down. Sino does a very good job of just disrupting the fight. And on the defensive positioning of defending your own buffs, you don't have to win out on the skirmish completely. Just forcing him back was enough to open up SSG to getting blown up.
Well, Vote being forced back here has the beads. Ultimate dropped down from range. Oh, but he gets up to the sky. Inbound. You can't tank the tower for that long. The dive being looked at. Not being seen through by Obey. Sino will lock down the purple buff, but another good rotation from the Obey jungler.
Man, the pressure that Vote's been getting all set now has got to be so frustrating. We've seen constantly the dive potential coming through, Kuzumbo constantly working his way in. I think it really does come down to the fact that Obey is trying their absolute best to try and shut down the long lane so that they can open themselves up towards a Gold Fury or even towards the 3v3 in mid. But we still, again, in Game 2, we're seeing a lot of the similar issues that we saw from Obey last time. Inbound is very rarely rotating out of this lane. He usually rotates out, takes one fight, then immediately goes back to duo, which is keeping WoWy completely even with Vote.
Yeah, so, you know, but the kind of big difference, I think, for Obey, you're absolutely correct, is what can they do now with the gold lead they have built? There was no gold lead in Game 1, despite some of these early kills. They have that now on their side. So how can you compound on that, move yourself closer to a win, is the next big question for Obey. We will be rejoining the action here on the back end of a quick pause. There's been kind of these counter invades, counter skirmishes going on. Another one here. As it's Cheerio being looked at, Obey are going to be in on the chase. He has to blink away. Roundabout. Wowie is close by. I'm not sure how long they want to keep up this trade. Maybe he drops aggro here, just gives a kill over to a Phoenix or a tower. But if nothing else, you're wasting the time of this Erlong check.
wasting the time, wasting his actives. That's twice now that Cherio's been forced to use his blink defensively this game, meaning that he's had no opportunities to go proactively on these ganks. And when Sino is playing Nemesis, a god that should outscale Erlang Shen into the late game, has a much weaker early game, you don't want to see a lead like this. You don't want to see one level up already in the jungle. We're seeing Sino going for a more auto attack damage build instead of going for the Golden Blade. At least I'm assuming it's not going to be a Golden Blade, considering that he didn't finish it first. It's likely going to be a Stone Cutting Sword, meaning his damage output and structure damage is going to be a lot higher. The ability to find early game kills is going to skyrocket the second that item finishes as well. Sino's doing a fantastic job just making sure that he has a good enough early game.
That's what you got to do. You got a 1-level lead over Cherio, and Nemesis has that solo potential and then some. You drop the ult and use the abilities and generally get yourself a kill. If you're far enough ahead, Cherio will end up locking down his speed buff, but Sino hovering close by the solo lane. So Nika has to be careful. This Krabraken is always interesting to follow with as we're kind of looking over at that solo lane. We know his damage is there in the early game, goes for a little extra power right off the top, but it's always, do you have the blink? Can you engage consistently enough that maybe is the shortfall? Sino looking for the engage here onto Dardes, wrapped around the backside is inbound. Rapper Dardes still on the retreat, Riptide blinked out by inbound here. It's going to be polymorph enough to get Dardes out alive. So, kind of returning to that point, are you at all concerned about Nika's ability to consistently get in and engage?
I think if there were any more leaps on the enemy team, I would have been a little bit more concerned, but considering that Obey's draft is largely going to be aggressive anyway, Wowie on this Cupid, inbound on Kuzumbo, Ducky on this Cthulhu, they're likely going to just be running at you once the team fight phase starts up anyway. Nika's going to have a much easier time, if not finding backline stuns, at least stunning out the front line and setting them up with the ultimate, separating the fight with the walls. No one's really able to get through them. I think it's going to be just fine for him.
River's Rebuke, 9 turns blessing, kill over to SSG. That is about as free as it goes for Rapper. Now the Emoja has pulled back a kill this game. In Mifflin, we were praising Obey for having this small gold lead on the back end of just 1 kill. It was around 1,000. That's now been halved to about 500. So SSG again starting to whittle away a lot of what Obey have built in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, it really comes down to these thin margins. 1,000 gold at 8 minutes would have been really nice, but it's not really enough that you feel confident forcing down a Gold Fury or even a Pyromancer. You can't really group up for towers at this point in the game since no one really has structure damage. It's really hard to find those leads. If anything, Obey should have been constantly looking to force fights, and that's what we saw. Inbound and Sino forced their blinks out, trying to chase out Dardas and Rapper, but the disengage was really strong. And once those relics are down, the engage potential just really evaporates.
My man, Vote, just cannot play the game today. That is Fields of Love, as well as the Nem ult drop down onto the ROM. The snipes will be used to slow down the fight. Rapper pushed away, no River's Rebuke, at least not for a little while. Polymorph into the punch, the damage on the back end, not there from Dardas, but the Riptide enough to keep Rapper alive. 2 big ultimates down, but Obey do lock down that purple buff.
Now, my man Vote is getting absolutely camped. He gets his beads forced out. Yamoja is forced to use the Heavenly. Inbound's not even going to let you back for free. He's going to see if he can find some way to stop it and set up a gank kill for Sino. It's really tough because this ROM already has a pseudo-losing matchup into this Cupid. He's very often going to be forced into using his ultimate defensively due to Fields of Love. He doesn't really have the same damage potential. And now Obey's grouped up on Gold Fury after getting a TKO. That's exemplary play, all off the back of that dual lane pressure. It's unfortunate for Vote, but he's playing into it as well as you could possibly hope. He's not really dying. He's able to maintain his farm at least a little bit, only 1 level down at this point. I think it's on the rest of Space Station to either match the rotations from Obey or find some sort of pressure somewhere else on the map.
Yeah, there was no rotation from SSG over. If there was, Obey would have seen it. Peppered all throughout the SSG red buff side of the jungle are some pretty deep wards, and really not much depending on the route that Obey choose to take towards that Gold Fury for SSG to sense them out. So I think the defensive utility was definitely there from Obey to realize that that one was a good idea. Much slower pace, though, here in this one. By this time last game, a lot more kills were on the board, and maybe that benefits Obey. I mean, Raijin always is going to age well as the game moves on, but now you got Wolfie on this Soul out of the mid lane, builds the Typhons first overall, and Actually doesn't even look like opting for any of the rings. Second. So interesting to take note of there, Mifflin. Looks like Ducky's gonna have to pop the ult and get out alive, but Wolfie always gonna be feeling better if this game goes on, and Soul is gonna find big damage in the lane.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a Toxic Blade coming out for Wolfie here, just to get a little bit of additional pen, attack speed, and survivability. But when you're playing a Magical Hunter and you're in the year of our Lord and Savior 2020, I mean, Ring of Akate is just so absolutely valuable with the raw stat stick on it. I'm surprised to see Wolfie elect not to go for it.
Wolfie drops down. Some decent damage there. Cheerio blink through, taken down. How about that combo yet again from Cheerio and Raffer? This time, no taunt needed by Cheerio. Raffer will set up the kill, and Cheerio has enough damage to grab his first of the game, assisting the first blood earlier on. It's another kin-size start for Cheerio on this Erlang Shen. Inbound's going to get locked down here, and mid-tier 1 tower's now going to fall 12 minutes in.
Yeah, this is something we see from a lot of the top-seeded teams. They really value taking out that mid-tower as early on as they can. That's twice now that Space Station have taken the tier 1 mid-tower before the 15-minute mark, and it just opens up the map so much. Unfortunately for them, Gold 3 has already fallen, so they're not able to force an objective fight there. But with Cherry hovering in the solo lane, Pyro might be on the menu.
Ducky locked into the walls, is able to dash himself out alive. Pin on the back end. Cheerio the one tanking up the tower. 9 turns Blessing sets up another kill. Cheerio with his second, still 100% KP. Now Sino being chased down by Argus in the mid lane. No rotation around the backside, so the Nem should be a-okay. But Cheerio, the journeyman this game, makes his way from mid on over to solo. Grabs a couple of kills, or a kill rather, in both spots. Not sure what Inbound's looking for here. Some damage maybe. But the Erlang Shen is starting to swing.
Yeah, that was an interesting blink from Inbound. There's really no way he gets kill potential there. He could have hit every single ability twice even, and he probably wouldn't have been able to put down Nika on that Kabrakan. I mean, trading out your blink there gets you absolutely zero value. No one on his team was around on the map to be able to rotate in. Maybe he was just looking to force out something defensively, try and scare Nika into potentially popping the thorns or something along those lines, but it just doesn't really pan out that way. Now the engagement factor from Obey is going to get a lot lower. That blink should come back up by the time we see them start to group up around this Gold Fury, but if SSG spot that out and choose to, they might look to exploit it and push down another tower, maybe around that duo lane, or even move in towards the Pyromancer.
Cheerio feeling like he's going to be able to consistently find his way into the back line, or even the front line, I guess. Find those auto attacks down. Kin-size right into that Toxic Blade, so some good anti-heal there. Inbound looking for the engagement. Hasn't been able to find it as consistently in Game 1. Remember, Inbound 100% kill participation through 6. My god, Cheerio absolutely swings. Good turnaround attempt. Oh my god, Sino does it! I'm thinking Cheerio's walking away with that kill, but no chance here. Sino has to blink away from the snipes. Dardes is gonna finally get rid of him. But there's a 1v1 for you. Sino walks away with the kill, but it gives one over to Dardes on the back end.
That's just that stone-cutting damage coming through there, just winning out on the trade. Cherry was a little bit slow on the ultimate to try and cancel out the shield coming out from Nemesis. Didn't get really enough value out of it. Nemesis healed up to about 50% off of her shield. Unfortunate for Cherry, the damage output so incredibly high from this Nem, but Cherry does set up for the return kill. It does cost them Vote's ultimate. Raffer uses his ultimate as well. It's a little bit tough to say that that was completely worth, especially considering Cherry is already a level up.
Yeah, it's a good temperature gauge for where these two junglers stand. They can duel one another pretty closely, but it looks like Sino's going to have the edge in that matchup despite maybe a half-level lead there. The largest gap in this game, Mifflin, a 3-level advantage for Raffer in that support role, has ticked over to that level 12 mark. Another frenzy this game around, so for the next few minutes, even just through the team fighting actives, SSG are going to have a big advantage.
Yeah, it seems like around that 8-minute mark, we saw Inbound leave duo lane and decide to never go back, and he's been struggling to find farm on the map. Being this far down, that second relic is so hugely impactful, especially if you're going to be the aggressor on gold.
Yeah, they're going to start up this Furio Bayar, and SSG are going to steal it away. Raffer walks in, takes it down. Now Inbound is going to lose his life, but Wolfie is going to grab one as well. Nika trembling on the backside as Wowie will fall. Ducky goes big and will pull back a kill onto Dardes. Not a total loss here for Obey, but it could get worse as Wolfie burns the actives, dies nonetheless. Sino still alive. Rapper and Nika versus Ducky and Cheerio here. The dash through from Ducky. Sino has the damage, but does he have the health? Not at the moment, but now he's got the shield as Rapper will try to turn around the damage. Instead, Obey think their lives are best spent elsewhere. There's no blink available for Nika, so this one is done.
Man, props to Doug for knowing that it was going to be Nika who absolutely dominates that team fight. He was allowed to free cast in the back line, and he took separate 2v1 or one-on-one engagements. Immediately targets out Wowie, sets up for the ultimate kill from Boat. Targets out Wolfie, just tremors him for about 20 seconds straight, just stuck there, taking the majority of the damage. And then on the tail end of it, is able to continually chase out. Now Sino's in a little bit of trouble, not going to have quite enough movement speed to find that kill, but Nika's gonna need to be addressed in these next team fights, and Obey have the tools to do it. If Sino decides to drop his ultimate on Nika, that defensive bruiser build really isn't gonna get a ton of value. I mean, even if Wowie is able to target him out without getting the majority of his health bar taken immediately, as long as there's just a little bit of peel in the back line, Nika's not gonna be able to do that. But left alone, we've seen the amount of terror he's allowed to wreak.
Well, and I think that your point, as Pyromancer locked in by SSG, about how Obey want to be fighting forward into you, so maybe some of the engagement is just Nika standing there and walking towards Obey, definitely came to fruition there. Obey kind of overshot Nika and left some of the backline alone, and the Trembles just separate that fight so well. Nika didn't really have to do all that much for it. Oh, wow, he is being looked at here. I'm not sure he realizes how many members of SSG are close by, or maybe he does, and he's just trying to bait it out. Cheerio, you've been baited, my friend, as Wowie will grab the kill there. Sino was lurking off to the side. Inbound dashes through, won't find the stun here. Boat forced up into the ultimate. He's going to snipe down some damage, but right into the River's Rebuke. It's inbound, left alone.
Nice.
Great wall there by Rapper. That's going to disengage this one. Only Cheerio goes down for SSG.
They're lucky that that Raptor roll was enough to disengage them, because Dardes at no point even gestured like he was even thinking about rotating over to that team fight. Instead, sticks around a mid, tries to pressure it out a little bit, push the waves forward. Now they're going to give up this tier 1 tower for free. Obey, still slightly ahead. They've been able to maintain this 500, 600, 700 gold lead for the entirety of the game, but they haven't grown it that much further. And I think the later this match goes on, we're going to see Space Station start to pull further and further ahead in these team fights. Obey's going to look to make a power play, or at least needs to look to make a power play pretty soon.
And you know, you look back towards game 1, and we're seeing a lot of the same here, where Obey have, I mean, you can't even really call that a gold lead. That's just depending on the crashing of the waves, really, which team is ahead on that side. So about dead even as far as gold goes, dead even almost literally as far as XP goes. And it was just that one fight around the Fury in game 1 that broke Obey, and there was no chance from then on out. So it's avoiding, right? It's avoiding or finding one of your own for Obey. The massive sweeping team fight that just loses you the game, but SSG always carry that potential to just punch you in the mouth when you least expect it. So I wonder how that plays into the mental of Obey, if they change up their game plan at all, if they kind of continue with what we've seen here, and you wonder how Sino's feeling. I mean, so much of that engagement has been from him, large damage on the backline. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, I think, how Obey adapt and change maybe from what happened in game 1.
And I don't think they really are changing up their playstyle. It doesn't seem like it affected their mental. Every single gold tree that's been started up has been started by Obey. They've been grouping up around Pyromancer whenever they can find the chance. They've been constantly looking to gank out Vote. Poor guy. He's been absolutely camped for about an hour now within this set. I mean, there's a lot that Obey are doing incredibly well. It's just how well are they able to transition these kills, these small picks into leads. And so far, it hasn't really panned out in their favor. But now Space Station's got a kill ahead. They've been able to turn these team fights a little bit. The real lead for Obey is lying inside of that mid lane. Wolfie's about half a level up at this point, whereas SSG's got 2 levels on their support over Inbound, who finally picks up a second relic. And it is going to be the Ankh coming through from the Kuzan boat, trying to deal with a little bit of that Yamoja healing, maybe potentially some of the lifesteal coming through from Boat. I think it's a very interesting pickup, but with so much anti-heal on your team already, you'd have expected to see him pick up something like Phantom for that damage mitigation and the ability to get his team through all of these walls that Space Station have.
Look at this. Small collapse from Space Station Gaming. Cheerio alone in the back. Nika being looked at as well. This fight is separated. Obey being corralled in here. Sino is going to taunt back in a few, but immediately has to disengage the fight, as Cheerio will pull back one. Sino is going to drop the damage rather onto Cheerio, who has to leave on the back end of things here. So both junglers down an ultimate. Rapper is as well, so is Wolfie an inbound. So maybe an ultimate advantage for SSG. Inbound taken down to half HP. Nika right in that Fields of Love there. Knocked up and melted down, and Wolfie grabs the kill here. Space Station Gaming now grouped up by themselves on the back end of the fight, with Inbound being knocked up and off to the side, but he's going to push Cherio right back into the fray. Suddenly, Wolfie has a double, but Dardes finds the turnaround as well. Both mid laners trading out doubles, and it's Obey left on the retreat.
And now Rapper is going to be able to use this time to heal up the rest of his team, try and force down the objective here. Wolfie's got a little bit of self-sustain, but Ducky with no ultimate is going to have a very hard time fighting in.
Oh my god, where did Rapper just go? I'm not sure. It's the roll off to the side. Goes Vote. Aegis used. Dardes 3 so far in this engagement. Ducky is looking for the final bit of damage onto Vote, but he's unable to find it. Aegis used. Oh, it's a double polymorph from Dardes. But Wolfie stays alive.
Nice
Vote off to the side. Finishes off Ducky here. A D aside for SSG around the Fury. Tides of game number 1.
Man, is that an unofficial quad for Dardes there, who was left largely alone in that team fight? Notice how the only time he took damage was when he was one of the only 2 members left from Space Station. Obey tried to work through the entirety of this tanky front line. We saw immediately Cherio dives in, tries to set up some damage, does set up enough CC for Dardes to pick up a double. Nika separates the team fight incredibly well, and I really think this is a strategy that Space Station came into this team comp with. And instead of going for the Bulwark that we saw last game, Dardes, knowing that he's going to have so much peel, has elected to go a more damage-centric build. And 22 minutes in the game is around the time it happened last time. Obey start up a gold Fury, lose out on a team fight, but not nearly as poorly. Now it's only about 3,000 gold separating these 2 teams. But SSG, 3,000 gold, they'll make a lot of use out of it. Likely look for the Pyromancer or the Fire Giant the second they're all feeling confident for another team fight.
Right, I mean, the game 1 cliff that Obey walked off of wasn't as steep, or was more steep, rather, than what SSG have built here. It was, what, a 9k gold swing out of nowhere from Space Station. But the golden XP graphs look real similar from what we saw in game number 1. SSG, that big old cliff built there, 5k, 6k almost in the XP department, 3k here for gold. Ducky being looked at, Vote around the backside, but a 3-man rotation from Obey will be there as an answer. No engagement on this Cthulhu. Obey considering this. They're starting up this Fire Giant. SSG have to respond. Obey melting it down quickly. Ducky buying enough time. Space Station Gaming, they're privy to it, but don't have the timing. What a call from Obey. They're going to take the Fire Giant down. Sino taken low by Dardes, and Ducky has got the kill, though. Cherio grabs one over onto Sino. There's Vote pouring down some damage. Cherio has found the knockup onto Wowie, but the Aegis saves the Cupid's life. Vote, he's allowed to free cast in the back line. The Rom untouched. Inbound left alive on the backside, but it's a double kill from Vote. There's only 2 FG buffs left. Mifflin, that might become 1, that might become none here in a second if they grab this kill onto Wolf.
Man, that is the most Obey Gaming Xbox playstyle Fire Giant call I've ever seen. There's a huge smile on my face. That's a sign of console league right there, man. Because it was a good call. They got the Fire Giant. It's just that they weren't quite able to disengage on the tail end of it. Maybe if they had a Heavenly Agility available, they may have been able to disengage. But immediately, Obey transferred into a team fight, pick up Dardes, the hard carry. But it's just Vote and Dardes taking turns hard carrying each one of these fights. And Obey is going to have to work through both of them if they want to win an engagement. But now, look at all the towers that are still available on the map. 2 towers, 2 Phoenixes, that's so much passive gold. That 9,000 gold swing that we saw last game, it's going to happen just a little bit slower.
Yeah, Miff, aside from golden XP, player damage is the chart that my eyes are on. Vote has 10,000 more damage than Wowie does in this game. 10,000 separates the top from his counterpart on the other side. He's been allowed to free cast. I mentioned it in the call there. Vote was untouched on the back. Ducky was sure trying, and granted there was some healing that topped off some of that health that may have been missing. Dardes here trying to back and to get caught in by the Fields of Love, but he has so much damage. The Aegis is big. Will he get the kill? Not this time around. Sino sweating a little bit. They do end up getting the kill and the actives out of Dardes, so a small breath of relief there, I think, for Obey. Gonna have to deal with this Hera for the next 45 or so seconds.
That's a huge pick. And Obey still has Fire Giant on one member. Being it on the Hunter means that they still have a ton of structure damage if they decide that they want to be the ones looking for the push. I don't imagine that that happens, considering we're looking at about a 6,000 gold lead favoring Space Station. But finding that pick on a Dardes is going to buy you about 30 seconds of time to just back up, continue farming, try and regroup a little bit, recalculate how you want to approach these team fights. I think my main concern is exactly as you pointed out. Wowie really hasn't gotten a lot of value on this Cupid pick. He's got this fantastic tank shredder build. And with the front line that's standing between him and the back line, he's got huge targets to use it on. Nika, Cherio, and Raffer are going to get absolutely shredded, but we haven't seen Wowie really able to find those auto attacks. The majority of his value coming from Heart Bomb and Fields of Love. He's having a very hard time winning these team fights.
Nika pops Sino's bubble here. It's the double dash away. Lack of mobility now from this Nemesis. Oh, the Riptide from Raffer pulled Sino back in, and actually some beads has to get used on the back end. Wow, he's so low. The snipes from both won't reach, but Nika blinks through. He'll finish off that kill here. Trembles on the back line. Thorns used here. Wolfie damaging himself just a little bit. Sino moves back in. Ultimate back up. But Voda's going to rampage his way through. Turns around the damage there. Looking for the double on to Ducky. But off to the side goes this Cthulhu. Now Wolfie down beneath the tier 1 tower. 3 members of SSG looking at him. Nika grabs the soft 2 and inbound still dueling with Cheerio. It's 4 out of 5 down. SSG another big win.
Just a questionable fight decision from Obey. Why are you taking these engagements when you're this far down? Yeah, 4 members dead, 5 members alive from Space Station, and time to heal on the way. This could very easily be game. I just don't understand why Obey decided to fight there. They could have grouped up on a tier 2, a Phoenix, their own Titan, the Fire Giant when it respawns, but fighting in the middle of a lane doesn't really check out with me.
Yeah, SSG, 5 members strong, are going to roll in, take down Ducky. They're going to take down the Titan as well. There was the soft fight back from Obey in both of these, but Space Station Gaming in both wait for that one big sweeping advantage. They find that one big sweeping advantage, and they make Obey pay for it. What a set from the SSG squad.
I think it's a little bit closer than it really pans out. Overall, it is an average length set, but there were a couple times there where had Dardes not put on his heroic cape and walked in, strapped his boots up, and hard carried a team fight, Obey would have pulled ahead. If Vote doesn't pick up a triple kill at the tail end, Obey would have pulled ahead. It was thin margins that SSG won by, but convincing nonetheless.
Yeah, convincing for SSG. Definitely one to hang their hat on. They'll escape this Saturday with a 2-0 win over Obey. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this set. Miff and I are going to go take a deep breath, collect ourselves after the fun it was casting that one. We're going to take a quick break, and when we're back, the desk will break down the set.
Welcome back to the SPL Space Station. Are the victors coming out on top with the 2-0 versus Obey. But that 2-0 might not quite say how competitive this set was here, Aggro. I think that Obey put up a pretty good fight, even though SSG eventually cleaned it up.
Agreed. Obey played well today. It was a competitive 2 games. It wasn't 2 absolute stomps, but at the end of the day, I still felt like SSG was going to come out on top basically all game, even when things are going Obey's way. They just had that air of inevitability to it. And this fight in particular by Dardes was just absurd. I mean, it just took so long. All that cooldown that he was building ended up really paying off. Every single polymorph he threw was at least was multi-man, which is crazy. That block of Stellar Burst is illegal. That shouldn't be allowed, because that's what saved Vote's life and allowed them to win this fight. He is just hitting everything. He hit everything that entire fight. And Hera 1 in particular just feels impossible to land. Oh, by the way, Vote was doing 1 billion damage the entire game, including that team fight. Vote really just popped off in this game. And really, I mean, Dave mentioned at one point, he was over double Wowie's damage into the late game. This was just a game where Vote came back with a bit of a vengeance, played well all game long, still got camped early, this time didn't make mistakes and die, and then came into the team fights and was just doing far more than what Obey Alliance could handle.
Yeah, it felt like somehow Space Station improved from game 1. They got even better that second go around, even with how well they played in that first game. And Vote, I think, needing that bounce back game, especially when in game 1, as you kind of highlighted, he really struggled under all that pressure, getting picked off a lot. But the whole of SSG bounced back. And on that same point, it felt a bit like Obey maybe had some regression, whereas in game 1, they had the kill lead but couldn't create any separation. Game 2 was much closer throughout, to the point where it kind of felt like it would eventually go SSG's way, so certainly a tough one there for Obey. But SSG are the victors, and SSG are the ones with their coach, Joshi, standing by for the interview.
That's right, Joshi is here with me to answer some questions about the 2-0 win SSG just had over Obey. First of all, Joshi, big congrats. And I kind of want to rewind, look at picks and bans maybe first overall. You guys go back-to-back Erlang Shen here in this one. On the desk, we talked about how that was maybe a tough matchup for Erlang Shen into what Obey were drafting. Do you guys kind of agree with that assessment? Why are you maybe grading, or why rather maybe pick Erlang Shen anyway into what might have been a difficult matchup? Do you just like the pick for Cherio?
Yeah, I think Cherry generally likes the pick a lot anyway. He will pretty much play into anything. And also this specific set, we know that Sino has played it a few sets before as well, so he likes the god. Mm-hmm. So could we had the next pick, so we would ban junglers, and then Erlang was open, so why not pick it?
Sure, the old pick and pseudo ban, I guess, on the back end of it. So it works out for you guys, back-to-back games here. Now, another thread that was in back-to-back games was Vote being looked at early and often. Game 1 camped somewhat successfully for a little while. Game 2 definitely looked at, but stays alive throughout most of it. How does Vote feel after something like Game 1? You get the win nonetheless, but it's got to be frustrating realizing that most of Obey's pressure is going to be funneled in. Is that something he expected, you guys expected to maybe happen here in this one?
I think we always, like, Obey is always looking to go aggressive, and I think it's generally around, like, the duo side jungle. So we're not really specifically thinking that he's going to get camped, but he dies, like, 5 times game 1, but I don't think it affects him that much, because also, like, right. Dardes is just popping off on Hera every team fight. So even though he's getting camped, it's like Dardes is slowly going through and just getting all the farm anyway. And then just team fight comes. I think he was only like a level behind. So he kept up in farm quite easily, honestly. I don't know, it was pretty good by him. So when team fights come around, it didn't really matter that he was 0-5 because he would still do just as much.
Well, you guys are starting to pull away a little bit as far as the standings go here. A couple wins out in the lead. First seed so far here in the SPL in Phase 2. You as a coach, you're looking at your squad, how they've been performing. Do you agree that first seed spot? Do you think that SSG is playing like the best team in the league?
I think so. Yeah, it's really good because I think picks and bans are really favorable for us in almost every set as well. Like we pretty much get to play everything we want, and then also just in game, it's almost like we flip a switch. Like a lot of the times we're falling behind early and stuff, but as soon as we get to mid and late game, I think everyone just has so much confidence in each other, and our team fighting is so. I think it's better than every other team for sure.
Right.
So as soon as it gets to mid game, and we just like win every team. Like we saw in our base set, like it's going even, and then like a goal-free fight happens, and it's just 5-0, and we just win the game off one fight. I feel like that happens a lot as well. So Definitely late game, we're probably the best team. Yeah.
Yeah, seems hard to beat right now, and Obey unable to do so here today. Joshy, a lot of that thanks in part to you as well. So congrats to you, congrats to the team on the 2-0 win over Obey. That'll do it for this interview. That'll do it for the day. So we'll go back to Finch and Agro one final time to wrap things up.
Thanks, Dolson. Space Station feeling like they deserve that #1 spot. And right now, I'm finding it difficult to come up with some reasons to disagree with them. Right now, if you're in the SPL, you're looking up at SSG, maybe some Radiance up there, but this team is the one you're measuring yourself against if you want to be the best.
Absolutely, they have to be. And I think Josh is really right. There are a lot of games where you look pretty even with SSG, and then you get to one team fight, and they 4-for-1 you, or 5-for-1 you, or 5-for-0 you, and you go, what happened? You know, how do we just instantly lose like that? This team is just really, really good when they get to that team fighting phase. I think they're going to be pretty tough to beat with the way they're playing right now.
90% win rate right now, bordering on absurd through 10 games to have only lost 1 set. And Radiant still with a chance to match that once they play the rest of their 2 remaining sets. Obviously, one of those postponed, the Sanguine set. We'll see if we get a chance to look at them a bit later on. And we still have some great sets coming up tomorrow. Pittsburgh Knights looked great in their set up against EU United, and Ghost have been faltering. So perhaps that's a closer set than would have expected coming up. And then SSG with the chance to improve even more, if you could believe it, up against the Renegades on Sunday. So some good sets coming up tomorrow.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that first set in particular, seeing if Ghost can bounce back after a not ideal showing from them on Friday. And Renegades looking to see if they can keep that momentum going from that set on Friday. They were obviously feeling really good about that victory, as they should. So we'll see if they're able to really keep that momentum going. If Renegades somehow end up 2-0ing this weekend against Ghost and SSG, then that would be an unbelievable storyline for them.
Yeah, everyone's going to start sitting there solo later for a week after that. If they can have that 2-0. But obviously an excellent set coming up tomorrow. Excellent 2 sets coming up tomorrow. So make sure that you were there to watch them. Appreciate you watching today. Appreciate production for making everything happen. And we will be seeing y'all tomorrow at 3.
Peach it.